Engineers hitting the 2030 renewable targets aren't using different technology. They just think differently.
Over the years, I went very much from thinking this was a technical problem to actually realising actually it's a mindset shift that has technical solutions. So we just have to think a little bit differently how we do things.
And often when I tell people this, they might think, well, what a load of nonsense, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've got some fantastic video footage which actually shows toads climbing out of gullies and up these ladders. They're really good climbers, and if you put a measure in like that for them, just something that enables them to help themselves, then it can make a really big difference.
Hi there, my name is Dusty Rhodes and you're welcome to Amplify, the Engineers Journal podcast and the conclusion of our special mini-series on sustainability. The gap between now and Ireland's 2030 renewable targets is being widened by thousands of incremental decisions where engineers stick to the way we've always done it. But the reality is that sustainability isn't an add-on expense, it's a design methodology, and it can make projects more resilient, profitable and even easier to improve. Our guest today will share the specific mindset shifts and practical steps that transformed their project outcomes, proving the biggest sustainability wins can come from the smallest changes in how you think. We're joined by Henry Boucher, Manager, Civil, Environmental and Renewable Engineering at ESB, who has delivered massive wind projects while pioneering community engagement, which literally gets the community invested. Also by Terry Wilkinson, Highways Application Engineer at ACO Technologies in the UK, whose out-of-the-box sustainable drainage approach proves simple design changes often solve complex environmental challenges without breaking budgets. Henry and Terry, you're both very welcome.
Morning, Dusty. Thank you.
Morning, Dusty. Thank you very much for having us.
So in the first two episodes of this mini-series, we've covered the SDGs and the current state of sustainability in Ireland, and particularly with transport. Today, I'd love to kind of get your experience on what we can do as individual engineers to build more sustainability considerations into our work. So can I ask you both, do you believe that small changes make a difference? Terry, what do you think?
It's a great question, and I think short answer is yes. Often with sustainability, people have these massive cost ideas and massive things. Oh, we need all these huge things that we don't have budget for. And sometimes they're what's needed, and sometimes great, but often some of the smaller sort of measures that you can put in place and think about can really have impacts, positive impacts on your projects. For things like wildlife and biodiversity, on and around roads. So roads and highways is an area that I focus on. And roads traditionally are there to move people around, I guess, and that's what we think of a road as of moving people and freight and that sort of thing. But historically, we've never maybe given great consideration to the big sort of green estate that's next to the road. And it is quite a significant area. And as I say, it doesn't always need to be massive measures. And I think from an engineering perspective, understanding what's needed and having a really good relationship with ecologists, landscape architects, that sort of thing, to understand the wider applications can really benefit that. And as I say, if you integrate that into your thinking right from the start, sometimes the solutions come naturally without having to maybe think about bigger infrastructure and stuff to do it. Sometimes you can easily build it in without major cost implications.
And Henry, in your experience, do you think small changes make a difference?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do, Dusty, right? And I would agree with a lot of what Terry says there, and very much building it in early, right? And thinking about it early in the projects, I think makes a huge difference. And I'm lucky where I'm working, right? And that I work in civil, environmental, renewable in ESB, or a developer of infrastructure. So I have an opportunity to work in that and to try to influence that what we do there. And I would say over the years, you alluded to it at the outset there, Dusty. Over the years, I went very much from thinking this was a technical problem to actually realising actually it's a mindset shift that has technical solutions. So we just have to think a little bit differently how we do things. And in lots of ways, it's very simple. It's biodiversity, like Terry talked about there. And for instance, if you're developing a solar farm or you're developing something, right? Yeah, there's an opportunity to leave hedgerows in places. There's an opportunity to leave tree stumps there in places. There's an opportunity to do lots of things that will enhance the biodiversity, or at least will will give it a chance. And that's very much having good relationships and having some understanding, and being able to kind of bring in ecologists and get some understanding of what will be beneficial. That very much works there. And in lots of other things, it's just very simple. In that using less is a very good start, right? And thinking about how you use less, and so using less in being efficient in design and concrete. And there's a little bit of a conflict there for engineers, because the first thing, right, is thing can't fall down or it can't be dangerous. So striking that balance, trying in using less. But I think really how you drive it or how you get it really is start to measure what you're doing, right? So understand and measure what you're doing, So if if you start measuring your embodied carbon and concrete, then you can focus very quickly on reducing that where possible, So I think it's the small steps, Dusty, and then measuring what you're doing, yeah.
Both of you work on very large physical projects, but there's tiny little details in there that people just don't consider. Terry, and kind of think of yourself particularly and about biodiversity, which is a particular passion of yours. Tell me more about building motorways and wildlife ladders.
It's one of my favorite topics. So yeah, with motorways, obviously, when we're looking to drain the motorway, then typically we've got gullies on the roads. If you've got amphibians, newts, frogs, toads, that sort of thing, in and around the area, they will often, because the slots on the gratings are quite large, obviously, to let water and things in. Unfortunately, that means they will also can be a trap for amphibians. So a real simple, cost-effective, very easy to install measure is a ladder in a gully, so that amphibians can escape. And often when I tell people this, they might roll their eyes. They might think, "Well, what a load of nonsense! That doesn't work."
Yeah.
And I've got some fantastic video footage which actually shows toads climbing out of gullies and up these ladders. They're really good climbers, and if you put a measure in like that for them, just something that enables them to help themselves, then it can make a really big difference. And as I say, something it doesn't have to be massively costly. It's easy to fit and retrofit, so you can install it in existing gullies, or if you're building new schemes and roads, you could do that as well. And as this, it doesn't impact the effect of the gully. You can still clean the gully. It's fixed to the sidewall of the gully, but a great, simple but effective solution. And when people see the results, and particularly obviously people want proof that these things work, and over the years we've seen lots of examples of that. And when people see it in action, I think it really spikes their attention. Really thinks, wow, that is actually effective, and it's a simple, cost-effective solution.
It's a tiny little detail, but it reminds me. Now you might know this story. If all the bees in the world were to go away, I mean, my personal opinion is, well, there'd be no honey on the shelves. I don't care. I'm not going to get stung. But mankind would not live for very long if all the bees in the world disappeared. So it's that kind of tiny little change in just thinking. When you went into work and said, "You know what, guys, I've had this great idea about wildlife ladders." This is what I'm trying to think. These little changes, how is it perceived, and how did you get people on board?
I think one of the things that you said earlier on really struck a chord with me, and I think it from my own background as well. As engineers, we don't like change. We don't like doing things differently, and we're not always the best, the most open-minded when it comes to new solutions. If it's not tried and proven, if there's not a standard that says this meets this standard or must fit to this, then we're always a bit reluctant. But nature and wildlife doesn't necessarily follow strict standards and rules, and when you have these ideas and you implement these measures and you see them work out, I think that's the thing. It's trying to get across and demonstrate to people that they do actually work, but also, and you said that the bees is a really good point as well, because often people are like, well, what do I care about a few toads, and what does it matter if if we lose a few toads? There's ecologists that would explain this far better than I can, but everything in nature and wildlife is linked. So if you have a decline of a certain species, whether that be toads or bees or whatever, it will have a knock-on effect to something else, either higher up the food chain or lower down the food chain. And bees is a really good point. I can't remember if I've got my statistics exactly right, but it's something around bees are responsible for their pollination directly and indirectly for around 80%, I think, of the food that we eat. So,
wow.
As you say, you might initially think, oh yeah, won't have much honey, but it has a much, much bigger effect and knock-on effect than that. And I think I think the trick is trying to get people to kind of understand that it's not just about that individual species and think, oh, okay, we might lose a few of those. What's the problem?
So that's kind of one really, really small idea, and it does make it literally makes a global difference. Henry, while wind farms are big projects, they're not the full story. Do you consider individual projects as standalone, or are they crucial components of a broader national sustainability strategy?
I think it's the latter very much, Dusty, right? So very much wind farms are part of the solution, solar farms are part of the solution, and then storage is a big part of the solution, and being able to crack really interseasonal storage. So there's no one silver bullet here, and also kind of as part of all of that, right, is efficiency and empowering people and customers that they can get the best use from their energy, retrofitting homes. The whole lot is intertwined, really, right? And we never get to net zero and I think the focus over the last while has gone maybe off the net zero and more on security and security of supply, just because of the geopolitical situation worldwide. And really, we never get to that unless we have a kind of wide variety of kind of renewable energy sources, and then we have some backup. At the moment, that's thermal, but there's big innovations coming in energy storage and battery storage and different types of storage, which will help alleviate that as well. So yeah, I think it's everything, Dusty, and it's kind of facilitating everything, and it's building awareness with everybody as well. Like the part they play and the part they can play, right? And it's awareness. And I think for engineers, like you talked there, right? I think some of the things that can be done around biodiversity, I think it's just understanding, right? We have an impact, and like we were saying earlier, maybe people don't like change, but I'd say maybe, right? But I'd say also people are very busy, so it's very hard to kind of the quickest solution is to maybe do what you did before. So we need to just change the thinking a little bit, as in, okay, this is what I did before, but for me, on a wind farm, is it possible maybe to reduce the amount of material that needs to leave the site? Can we can we set the roads up? Can we make better use of the material that's there on site? Do we need to import as much as we do? All things like that. Like around, do we need to kind of take out hedgerows, or can we actually minimize some of the impact there as well, right? So there's lots of little things that you can do that all add up to quite a bit, and managing water, managing the impact on the environment, all of that, right? There's lots of things we can do that will have a difference, yeah.
So what kind of practical early steps then do you take to help embed sustainability and streamline the deliverability of projects?
So some of the practical steps we would take is we would look at the carbon and embodied carbon in things like where are the major materials that have embodied carbon in them, for instance, right? Because that is probably the biggest impact, or one of the biggest impacts. So we would look at how much concrete, how much steel we are using, and then see, well, is there an opportunity to reduce or streamline that? We would also look early on in projects, how can we make them more circular, right? Or how can we drive circularity into them? Looking at what will happen at end of life and reuse. So maybe designing things that can be reused later on, or potential reuse later on. So that would come into that would look at locations where some of the infrastructure is located, so substations, opportunities to extend them maybe later on with population growth and that. So driving that in, looking at how the sites we pick and the impact that has on biodiversity, and is there opportunity to enhance biodiversity on some of those. That won't be there in every site, particularly the urban ones, but it is there in some of the more rural ones. So building that in, but it's thinking about how much we use. And if I was to summarize it, I think it's reducing what we use, and also just being aware of the impact of where you are and how you can minimize the impact of where you are,
Grant, and literally just be thinking that from day one. Both of you have spoken about Mother Nature and biodiversity and everything like that. The other problem that we encounter is human beings, I hate to say it, and community engagement is hugely important to a lot of projects. And there's been a lot of controversy over the years about wind farms and all that kind of stuff. Henry, just one more question for you on this. From your own experience, what are the most effective communication strategies that you have used just to build trust and have these people actually end up supporting sustainable projects?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to engage, and I'd say we have learnt at this over the years, Dusty, it was really important, I think, to engage early on projects and explain to people what you're planning to do, and then work through community groups, right? Work through engagement in the schools, and as you go along, right? In some ways, it's very simple. It's kind of do what you said you were going to do. So if you kind of made commitments, honor them, and work with the community. Be conscious, right? You have an impact. There's an impact most definitely during construction, and in some cases, right, there's been impacts after construction, right, where one or two residents might have been adversely affected. You'll see some high-profile cases there recently in the papers and that, right. So I think it's really on everybody, right, to kind of, if there is a problem, face up to it and solve it, right. Don't leave it, and because I think it's very much changed now, right? But if you look at people would have seen these as kind of faceless groups, right? They just come in and build a wind farm and go. But most wind farms now, right, there's a community benefit fund, and there's lots of benefits to local communities. Lots of them are used by people, right? They go walking around them and that, right? They open up trails and that as well. They produce energy. That's kind of very important to us now. Particularly with what's going on geopolitically and that, right? So Ireland, quite a high percentage of energy comes from renewables. For an island on the west of Europe, right, is quite high, the percentage that's coming from that. So it's trying to get people on board, explaining the need and explaining what the impacts will be and what you're doing to minimise the impacts, Dusty, and then following through on what you said you did. And it's not a faceless entity that's developing it and gone for good, yeah.
Communication is so important and actually solves so many problems, especially at the early stage. Away from communications, Terry, given the increasingly frequent extreme weather events that we're having now across the UK and Ireland, what practical design principles do you think help systems fail less and recover quickly?
Well, that's a great question. So we, as you rightly say, the more extreme rainfall we're getting now, we've got some of the standards that we've got in place were written quite a long time ago. I think particularly some of the roads and highway standards from sort of Transport Infrastructure Ireland and the DMRB in the UK, they're pretty similar in terms of what they look to design to in terms of rainfall. And I think they're kind of 30, 40 plus years old. Obviously, it was a very different environment back then. So I think one of the things you need to think about is you've got a standard in place, but you need to think about when it hits those extremes, where the water's going to go. So you might design for no flooding for sort of leaving the highway for a 1 in 100 year event. So up to that, you'll think, okay, where's that water going to go? Can I route it? Where can I route it to? And I think there's a lot of software capability out there now that you can accurately model these. You can put in your sort of ground surfacing and that sort of thing to understand where that goes. So I think having that, utilizing that technology is very beneficial in that regard. But I think it's to think about the standard, design around the standard, but also going beyond that and looking at what happens when it goes outside of that, because as you say, that is happening more and more.
Are you able to give me an example?
If you're designing to or looking to SUDS and sustainable drainage systems, we've got the good practice as designed to the 4 pillars of water quantity, water quality, amenity, and biodiversity. And historically, water quantity has always been the kind of the main issue in terms of drainage. It's an issue, let's deal with it, let's get it off the side so it's not causing a safety issue, which, rightfully so, arguably that is one of the more kind of important pillars. But when you certainly if you look for extreme events and you design to extreme events, if you can utilize other systems like nature-based solutions and you can help to benefit nature with that. Maybe with this excess water, you can look where you can utilize that and help it for irrigation of sort of trees and the sort of the environment and habitats where wildlife live. So I think there's definitely opportunities to utilize that. And maybe in the past we've just quickly tried to, okay, let's get rid of the water, put it in the sewer and get rid of it. But if we can utilize that excess water in these ways, then it benefits. It has a multitude of benefits, which say not just for the safety, but for wildlife and environment as well.
Terry, continuing on from community involvement, collaboration in general is hugely important across disciplines within the industry. How have you found people are at working with you to achieve more environmental goals?
Really good, actually. In the last in the last few years, I've had an awful lot of engagement with ecologists in particular. I kind of went to a webinar about 4 years ago that was kind of run by an ecologist and talking about the importance of collaboration. And we've since gone on and set up a few events trying to improve communication and collaboration with the likes of engineers and ecologists. And when you start to encourage that, people are really receptive to it. And I think a lot of it is about understanding it from the other disciplines' point of view. So I think from engineers and ecologists' point of view, often without a great deal of understanding of what each other does, you can almost feel like you're against each other. And ecologists might say, why is the engineer recommending this? This is terrible for nature. And the engineer's thinking, well, why is the ecologist saying, these newts are going to hold up my development and that sort of thing? I just need to get them. When you have those discussions right from the outset, and you understand what the challenges are, you can really actually prove effective and efficient solutions that get over those barriers that I think historically have kind of been left till further down the line when the design's set in stone or virtually set in stone, and you're just trying to kind of do the best you can to kind of oversee a problem that maybe could have been avoided if you've had that discussion right at the start. And I think I'm starting to see it more and more now, where we're discussing things right at the outset of a scheme. The ecologists are inputting from their specialist side of things, so you can understand things like species, the types of habitats and what needs to be done. And the engineers think, okay, well, we could have a simple solution here to kind of help mitigate against that. If we're kind of cutting across these habitats, can we reconnect them in some way, whether that be major infrastructure like a green bridge or an underpass or a culvert, or planting or habitats that can be beneficial and sympathetic to that. And I think when you see it right, when you address it right from the outset and having that collaboration, it's really beneficial. And it's actually really rewarding as well when you come up with those solutions together and collaboratively from the start, and then everyone's keen to kind of work towards that solution as well.
Henry, I'm going to ask this to both of you actually, but Henry first. For an experienced engineer listening today, all right, who's looking to deepen their role in renewable energy development, what are the key skills or knowledge areas they should focus on, do you think?
I think for me anyway, sustainability is so broad. Like it covers such a multitude. Like when you start looking at everything, you nearly talk yourself out of it. I mean, it's so broad. So I think it's a bit like what Terry has alluded to. It's kind of building the understanding. So I'd focus on an area that you have an interest yourself, and whatever that is. If that's the biodiversity, if it's more on the technical concrete or steel, or if it's there's very much a drive now around the circular economy, and very much I'd focus on whatever the area is, and I'd say do one thing, right, and then you can go back and improve something else. But I'd say just improve one thing is probably the way to do it. So, for example, we we would have had projects where we've reused some of the infrastructure, reused some of the diesel generators on battery projects, we've reused some existing ducting on projects. And that was all people who just did that and kind of did it quietly, right? It wasn't until you go ask and you find out some of these things. So, and that was all just people thinking, oh, actually, I could use that again, and that'll work. It's the most sustainable building, right? It's probably the one you're in at the moment, even it mightn't be very energy efficient, but it's there, right? So if you can reuse existing infrastructure first, I would say is probably the main thing. And then I think focus on an area you're interested in, see if you can make it something that makes a difference there, and then go back again. You can improve it again. But I'd say just do something, right?
I love that. That's a brilliant attitude. Just do one thing. Just do one thing. It's fantastic. Terry, for yourself, what key skills or knowledge areas should engineers focus on if they want to develop more?
I think it's very different than it was sort of when I did my degree, however many years ago that was now, too many to think about. It was quite, you did your standard things like your structures, your soil mechanics and that sort of thing. There was very little, and when I did my education around the environment for it, it was kind of seemed to be quite a new, excuse me, it seems to be quite a new sort of module within things there, which is quite surprising now. So I think understanding a lot around the environment is very important for engineering now, not just in terms of biodiversity, but everything that links into in terms of climate change and carbon and everything else like that as well.
Now, both of you are from very different backgrounds, but we're talking about changing the mindset. Is there anything you want to ask each other before we head off into the sunset?
Can I ask you a question? I really like the comment that you made back there, Henry, about find something you're interested in and just and do something. Do one thing. I think that's a really, really good sort of ethos. What would you, if you could kind of go back and tell your younger self one thing, or ask your younger self one thing, I don't know, would it be something like that? What sort of advice would you give your younger self starting out in your career?
Oh, if I was starting out, so I probably would say to myself, look, it's all about communication. I think probably took me a while to cop onto that one, Terry, right? So it's all about communication, and like the more effective you can communicate on things, right, the more effective you'll be at getting buy-in and getting things done, really. So I think that's probably it, right? And I probably realize you don't have to do everything yourself, right? You can get people will kind of move along and come along with you as well, right? But it probably took me a while to cop onto that as well, right? But yeah, maybe the two of those. And can I ask, just from yourself, Terry, then, are you seeing people coming looking really for more around kind of environmental and sustainability, or do you think at the moment, is it kind of a cost decision, right? Is cost always kind of coming in there, right? Or what do you see? Yeah.
Cost is certainly a big factor in it, I think. It's still often seen as or still often thought, I think, as a nice to have rather than we must do this. Yeah. And I think, like anything, I guess you need to drive it. You need sort of policies and legislation for it. Often, until it's not legislated for, things aren't going to be done. We're starting to see. I'm starting to see a lot more, and I think maybe some of it's due to the collaboration and the fact that it delivers wider benefits. So I'm starting to see more interest, more discussion, and more people looking at sort of environmental improvement, sustainability improvement, certainly on sort of going back to kind of wildlife, on the sort of connectivity. Yeah. I think we're understanding that roads, linear infrastructure, rail, that sort of thing is very much a barrier to wildlife, and we are starting to see that more and more. There's quite a disparity, I think, between policy and legislation across the UK and Ireland. Each kind of nation actually has quite different legislation standards around a lot of it. And I think it would be nice to have a bit more of a coordinated sort of thinking across that to kind of help us to understand where we can go.
That's a whole other bag of worms. That's a whole other mini-series just all on its own. Listen, let's leave it there for today. If you'd like to find out more about Henry and Terry and some of the topics that we did speak about, you'll find notes and link details in the description area of this podcast. Henry Boucher, Manager, Civil, Environmental and Renewable Engineering at ESB, and Terry Wilkinson, Highways Application Engineer at ACO Technologies. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Dusty. Thanks, Terry. Bye.
Thank you, Dusty. Thank you, Henry.
If you enjoyed our podcast today, do share with a friend in the business. Just tell them to search for Engineers Ireland in their podcast player. The podcast is produced by dustpod.io for Engineers Ireland. And for more on sustainability and engineering, do visit our website at engineersireland.ie. Until next time, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, thank you for listening to our special sustainability mini-series. Take care.